Okay, this is just a brief review of what we covered the day before on 7.4. Okay, more specifically, the transformations involved. So remember what we talked about yesterday. Anything outside the parentheses is referring to the y, which is that vertical direction. Okay, anything inside the parentheses is referring to the x, which is that horizontal direction. So you have to keep that in mind. And anytime I see anything inside the parentheses, I have to think the opposite, which is hard to remember, but it's easy enough for these at least. We don't see them that advanced. Okay, so just to break it down further, okay, right here, it's the same idea. If this leading coefficient is positive, that means it's going to open up. Okay, if this leading coefficient has a negative, that means it's going to open down. So in this case, it would be these dots right here. Notice what it did. It's a reflection across the x-axis. So we refer to it as opens down. They refer to it as a reflection across the x. So that's what happens when that is positive or negative. Now the a value. This is what we refer to a stretch or a compress. They use the word dilation, same idea. It either gets bigger or it gets smaller. So if this a value is bigger than 1, okay, then it's going to be a stretch. All right. If it is so in this case, this is the parent function right here, the original, and you notice these dots right here. Notice how it got thinner. So if it's a stretch, so that means the parabola does get pushed in, so it's thinner, okay? For the horizontal, if it is less than 1, if this a value is less than 1, that means it's going to be a compress, which means it's going to get wider, okay? It's going to go out more. So if you look at the difference between these two, here's the standard parabola, and then these dots right here is after a compression, it gets wider, okay? Inside the parentheses, we're talking about left or right, and it's a shift, but I have to think the opposite. So if I see -3 inside the parentheses, my mind wants to say it's going to shift over to the left 3, but it's actually the opposite. It's going to be to the right 3. So if you look at here, this is the original. It moves over to the right 3. Whereas if it's positive inside the parentheses, my mind wants to say it's going to go to the right 1, but it's actually the opposite. It's going to go to the left 1. Nothing else happens. It's just that shift over. So anything inside the parentheses, think the opposite. Then we have outside the parentheses. This is that vertical shift, and I take it literally. So if it is +4, then it's going to go up. If that number is positive, that means it's going to shift up. If that number is negative, then it's going to shift down. It's going to move downward. Okay, so to find, using this formula, you can also find the vertex and the axis of symmetry. The vertex is this h and k value. So the only thing to remember, though, this h value, we have to think the opposite. So if I put -2 here, when I pull it out, I need to pull out +2. The k value would not change. So that's just another way to find the vertex, which means that minimum or that maximum. And then lastly, we have the axis of symmetry, and the simplest way to find the axis of symmetry is this h value. So it's always x equals a number or a numerical value. But also, again, you have to keep in mind this h value, I have to think the opposite. So if it's -3, I got to think +3. If it's +6, I got to think it's -6.